Alrighty, how's it going, everybody? How's it going? This is yours truly, Rama Screen, covering movies, TV, and entertainment. And man, I love this show, True Detective. I just finished watching True Detective, or tonight's new episode of True Detective Season 3. It's episode 4, titled The Hour and the Day. Um, just like with all my episode recaps and my TV reviews, this too contains spoilers. So heads up, spoiler alert. You've been warned. I will be spilling some spoilers. This review is mainly for those of you, my fellow True Detective fans, who have also watched tonight's episode. By the way, tonight's episode, let's start with that. The runtime seems longer than usual. It's not just like 58 minutes. It's like an hour, and I want to say an hour and 7 minutes. I think an hour and 7 minutes on the clock, I believe. Um, so it felt a bit longer than usual. Um, but that's okay. I'm not complaining. I was so my attention, not intention, my attention was fixed on it the entire time, and I credit that to the writers, Nick Pizzolatto and David Milch. Now, David Milch, as you know, is the guy who gave us one of my favorite HBO series of all time, Deadwood. And Deadwood is coming back with its own movie version. David Milch is a fantastic writer. He also wrote for NYPD Blue series, which was also one of my favorite shows um, in the 90s. All right, so what happens uh, in tonight's episode? The hour and the day. Um, last episode, by the end of it, they, as in Roland and Hayes, figured out that, oh my God, there's this photo of Will, the dead boy, uh, posing the same pose that he has or that he had when he died, which is kind of like religious, kind of praying and with his eyes closed. And apparently, it's part of a picture that's done by this church that they go to, or the kids used to go to with their parents, I guess. But um, the difference is, for some reason, Will closed his eyes, while the rest of the other kids, whose photos were taken also by the same priest, uh, they didn't necessarily have to close their eyes, or they didn't do it. He had his eyes closed. So Hayes and Roland meet the priest in the church, and that leads them to figuring out where the dolls are from, which is from that one lady who apparently makes those dolls. So it's like, oh my God, they found the dolls. Okay, they found who made those dolls, and that leads them to um, the guy with the dead eye, because the lady describes him as African American, and that he bought like 10 dolls from her. But the African American guy with the dead eye denied it. He said, like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. He got really defensive, and he's like, oh my God, this white cop's gonna shoot me. So I'm gonna get back to that, but that's part of the conflict in tonight's episode. Um, the other thing that happens, remember, there are three time periods: in the 80s, and the early 90s, and about probably 2015, when Hayes is already, you know, old with gray hair, and that his kids are already grown up. Um, in the 90s, on the second time period, what happens is the fallout or the aftermath of Hayes' wife, Amelia, played by Carmen Ejogo. You know how she last episode tried to lure the investigator who was looking who the investigators who are looking into the possibility that Julie may be still alive, and that Julie was involved in some kind of a pharmacy theft. And so um Hayes, Mahershala Ali's character, he did not like that. He did not like that that his wife is doing her own investigation like that. And so that's, that bickering happened last season. I'm sorry, last episode, last week. And so that kind of, you see the aftermath of that in this one, where they argue some more, and it ends with them like having sex, which is so cliched. um and in the 90s also we see, I'm sorry, yeah, the 90s. Okay, so we see uh, uh Hayes joining Roland's special new, tactical unit, whatever, because they reopened the case into Will's murder and to Julie's disappearance, Will's sister. So because of this new evidence that, oh my God, she may still be alive, um, and so he reopened the case, and you see in this whole part of tonight's episode where it seems that it's not necessarily a clash or a collision, or a difference of opinions, but Hayes, I guess, is trying to assimilate himself into the new tactical, or let's just call it new ops unit, and he's trying to adjust and trying to figure out, okay, where do I fit in this group, and how do I do that without rubbing um my old partner the wrong way, because my old partner Roland West is now the leader. In the 80s, Hayes is the leader of the investigation. But that's, the tables have turned now, so there's some, there's that power dynamic, and it's just like, oh, I don't want to, he's my boss now. It's like, um, you could tell, like, there's a moment in tonight's episode where Roland kind of steps in and interrupts Hayes, not in a rude way, but it just kind of like subliminally trying to remind Hayes, hey, I'm the one leading here now. So, not necessarily a pissing contest, but just still kind of remind Hayes, like, hey, your input will be appreciated, but I'll be kind of steering the wheels from here on out. So that's what happens in the 90s. In the 2015, um, you know, Hayes now graying hair. One of the things that happens in tonight's episode is that he comes to the hotel room of the interviewer. You know how he's been interviewed by this show, that kind of like Forensic Files show or whatever, or 2020 investigates. So he comes to her room because he's been so he's been racking his brains trying to figure out whether or not she knows more than she lets on, because throughout the previous episodes, whenever he got interviewed by her, it, he got the sense like, oh my God, maybe she knows something that I don't about the case. Because she keeps bringing things up, or bringing new things, or either bringing things up that only he or a few people would know about, or bringing some new evidence, like, or new suggestions or new theories, and that makes him think like, oh my God, I never thought of it that way, or from that angle or from that perspective. So he comes to her office, to her room, and kind of persuades her like, hey, do you know something that I don't? And it's interesting how she answers, like, because she points out that one of the characters that they interrogated back in the 80s, that's related to the Purcells, is now dead. Um, and so she showed him the photos of the skeleton found, and and she mentions that she doesn't want to show all her cards just yet. And to me, that's like, it's like the show is telling you, the audience, is, hey, this is what we're willing to reveal right now. But if you want to see all our cards, that'll be next week's episode, or that'll be the subsequent episodes. Um, I just find that to be kind of amusing. And also in this 2015, it shows how he deals with his son. I guess the son is also a part of the law enforcement. I did not know that, and so he's trying to acquire the help from his son with the case. And the son keeps like telling him, "Dad, why are you still on this? Like, he even worries like, what did how did you get to my station? Like, did you take a bus? What if you forget where to, you know, where to stop, or where to, it's like, come on, dad, can't you just retire? But you can tell that it's eating Hayes up, or it keeps eating him up. Now, okay, so that's what happens in these three time periods. And let me kind of give you some of my thoughts. I have some notes here on my screen. Um, First of all, and I did not get to discuss this in last week's review of last week's episode, in that, or maybe I pointed out or mentioned it just briefly, that Hayes has been haunted by his ghosts. Um, in previous episode, it was his wife, his dead wife, and I think I told you guys that it got really pretty freaky or scary. That's probably the first in, I don't know a while probably, that True Detective feels like a horror film. Um, and tonight's episode, he's haunted by the ghosts of the Viet Congs that I assume that he killed during the Vietnam War. Um, and man, they're just standing there behind him, behind his back, and because this is Hayes in his this is in the third time period. He starts losing his mind, starts losing his memories, starts losing his recollection, and so he's talking to himself. He's just like, you could tell that the case is weighing on him. It's taking a toll on him. It's like so frustrated, like, ah, all these years I can't get to the bottom of this. And either he's talking to himself, and sometimes he kind of maybe acknowledges the ghost, not necessarily talks to the ghost. Um, but yeah, that's some freaky stuff too. That's some James Wan shit right there. James Wan insidious shit right there. So I just want to point that out. Another thing I have on my note here. Finally, they address the racial tension, racial issue. Because I mentioned to you guys in previous reviews or previous episode recaps of this season, because this is episode what? Episode 4, right? So the first 3 episodes, I thought, like, I was trying to look for it, maybe like, oh, maybe there's some prejudice against, the fact that he's a black detective and whatnot, and that he's working with a white detective, and this is Arkansas, so it's in the South, so there's got to be some. I mean, David Milch and Nick Pizzolatto as the writers, they can't just overlook that, right? Or just kind of let that part off the hook. Um, so tonight it kind of gets addressed, not necessarily in the racial tension is obvious, but it also emphasizes the camaraderie of Hayes and Roland even more. Here's what I mean. There are 2 occasions that the racial tension gets brought up in this episode. The first one is when the African American with the dead eye, because basically Roland and Hayes are asking him questions, outside his trailer, and the black guy with the dead eye gets defensive. He's like, "No, I'm not gonna let you go inside. I know we can talk out here." The reason being he wanted that way is because he wants his neighbors to see it, and then he wants to kind of create a commotion. It's like, look, this white cop's gonna shoot me, you know. And then he'd be like looking at Hayes, Mahershala Ali's character, and he would say to him, "Yeah, something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing here, like, come on, brother, like you're a black guy. Well, why are you wearing that badge? How do you wear that badge? So basically, kind of implying or indicating, like, come on, you're supposed to be on our side." And of course, Hayes is on the side of the law first and foremost. It's not about race. And so the neighbors get really amped up and angry, and that really almost pisses Roland off. And on the drive home, Roland and Hayes have discussions about it. It's like, okay, would you have shot them if they were black? But Roland says, like, hey, because they were black, I was even more careful. I would not even like think that as a first option. If they were white, like my color, skin color, white, the, then I would not hesitate. You know, that to me that says something along. To me, that says that Roland is aware or understanding of the repercussion or the consequence of a white cop shooting unarmed black people in that scenario. It would not make for great headline. It would not make for good reputation on his part. Um, so to him, it's basically him saying, "Hey, because I'm facing black people there, I have to be extra going the extra mile to be extra careful. Not being too hasty about or being too easy on the trigger, um, because the optics would not look good. You know, and and the other second part, the racial tension gets brought up is when Scoot McNairy's character, Thomas Purcell, I think that's his name. Yeah, Tom Purcell. He gets in trouble with some guys in the bar, and then Roland picks him up because Roland's been taking care of Tom Purcell because Tom Purcell's they're not necessarily friends. It's sort of like it's like a sponsor and sponsoree relationship. Sponsor. I'm using the Alcoholic Anonymous illustration. So that's the nature of their relationship. And so Roland's supposed to. I'm guessing Roland is on his emergency number. so so on the drive home, Tom Purcell says the N word in reference to, of course, Detective Wayne Hayes. Says, "Where's that N-word cop?" It's like, I can't believe, I'm putting this case to find my daughter in the hands of an N-word cop. And Roland obviously doesn't like that at all, but Roland doesn't lash out on Tom Purcell. He just looks straight, very stoic as he's driving. And Roland says along the lines of, "Hey, he's the best cop there is." He vouches for his partner. It's like, he's the best cop there is. And so Tom feels so guilty, and he's like, "I'm so sorry I used that word. I'm really, really sorry." And Roland says, like, "Well, people who are worse than you have said it to him and meant it." And then Tom says, "I'm sorry for that too." Uh, so those to me is the two parts in this episode in which the writers Nick Pizzolatto and David Milch want to give you, the viewers or the audiences, hey, there is some racial tension here going on because the region or because of the era, the 80s and 90s. But that there's number one, there's some redeeming value on the part of Tom Purcell, and number two, it goes to show that, yeah, maybe that's the case when people kind of view their partnership. Oh, what is this white cop? Oh, is this white cop going to shoot me? Or like, oh, why do I leave the case in the hands of N-word cop? Maybe people around them view them that way, racially, through the racial lenses. But between Roland and Hayes, man, again, and I've emphasized this before, that I admire their respect for each other, man. Even in the 90s, when I mentioned to you earlier that Roland now is the leader of the task force. There you go. Let's just use that task force, not tactical unit. What tactical unit is SWAT. So my bad, my bad. So he's the leader of the task force, and Hayes coming in as like somebody who's been away from being investigator, coming in back again, and now he's not the leader. And there's this younger detectives kind of trying to get themselves up to speed. And I mentioned to you earlier that there's a bit of a disruption, or maybe Roland interrupts Hayes a little bit. Just try to remind Roland, like, hey, just try to remind Hayes that, hey, Roland is now the leader. Even in that respect, even when that happens, you can tell that they're not doing it for pissing contests or some hierarchy bullshit. Like, hey, there's never a moment where freaking Roland is kind of like telling Hayes, like, who like, hey, I'm the boss now, and vice versa too, vice versa. And you can tell that Hayes is like, Hayes understands, like, okay, I'm this is your task force, not my task force, so I'm gonna observe and try to help as best as I can. Um, man, so good, man. This is a better partnership than to me than Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson was in the season one. You might disagree with that, but I love this. Stephen Dorff and Marshall Ali, by the way, uh, fantastic actors. Ali, he won SAG Awards this evening for Best Supporting Actor, and he's gonna win Best Supporting Actor for Green Book all the way at the Oscars. This has been a good year, and that's interesting because in 2014, with True Detective season one, when True Detective season one came out, that was 2014. That was also the year or the season that Matthew McConaughey won his Oscar for Dallas Buyers Club. So if Marshall Ali wins for Green Book, it's just an interesting fun fact. You're like, oh, the new season comes out just at the same time that the actor wins the Oscar. Okay, so moving on. Also, I have on my note here that the whole argument that Detective Wayne Hayes and his wife Amelia have in the house, in the room, that ends with them having sex. The argument, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. Again, that's the word I'm looking. The word I want to use is cliched. Um, but I know there's another better word to fit that. But it's just that it starts with, basically, the argument starts with, it doesn't even start with an argument. Basically, he's telling his wife, "Hey, isn't this great? I got a new job. I mean, I'm back. I'm back being a detective again in this new task force." And the wife is still bitter or angry at him, lashing out on her because he finds out that she's been doing her own investigation. Um, he probably disagrees with that method, or maybe he doesn't want, or so it escalates to him kind of belittling her, because it's like, what, you said you've always wanted to write a book, now you're just trying to achieve that dream at my expense, at the expense of my case. And I guess to me it doesn't seem like it's fully thought out. Like, I know people argue about the stupidest and littlest, the smallest things ever. People can argue about the most significant things ever. But tonight, the argument between them is much ado about nothing. Um, but then again, it's maybe Nick Pizzolatto and David Milch want to point out the pride that Detective Hayes has. Um, like, he's too proud to even apologize or to even say that I'm wrong. So he's being defensive. Is, what do you want me to do? What do you want me? Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Just to kind of like, what do I do? What do I have to do to shut you up and to for us to end this whole thing? But the sex thing, yeah, it's nice and all, but it seems too comical and cliche to me. I don't know if that was necessary. But that's really minor thing. I'm not gonna nitpick on it. Uh, the dating, when they're in the restaurant, Hayes and Amelia, that I find very interesting, more interesting than the argument. Um, because in their dialogue, not only they want to get to know each other, and we, the audience, get to know a bit about Hayes. Um, but you also get to kind of see um, whether or not they're on the same level as far as catching each other's sarcasm, catching each other's jokes and puns, and you can tell that they're on the same level of intellect. And so to see that exchange happen, and the dance that they have between them in their dialogue, it's fascinating. I really like that scene in the restaurant. um so that's one of my favorites tonight, definitely. All right, so to conclude, so we won't make this video review any longer than necessary. um as far as the investigation goes, the ball is rolling nicely. um More and more things get revealed every week. um I'm curious to see how each of the three time periods, how each of them ends. I'm curious to see how in the first time period, the 80s, how Roland and Hayes part ways, and in the 90s also. I wonder how the task force ends, because remember, the case has not been solved all the way till 2015. So what happens? Well, like what is it that made them not able to close that case in the 80s and the 90s, so much so that they have to kind of disband the task force or part ways as partners? So I'm curious to see what happens in those two occasions. Um, and of course, I'm betting that the everything will be revealed, or the case will be closed or solved in the 2015 time period. Because now he's trying to battle, man. He's trying to make sure that he gets to the bottom of this before he loses his memory completely and dementia takes over. And while he still has that interviewer, right, the TV reporter, he's trying to get, oh my god, this is my last chance before I go off to the sunset, or worse, if I die. It's like, this is my last chance to finally figure out what this is all about, regarding the Julian will. Yes. Oh, fantastic. Great episode. Tonight's episode ends with a bunch of militias or vigilantes. I would say vigilante, not militia. Vigilante, again, they're bothering Woodard, who is this veteran. Um, Hayes and Roland and Woodard are Vietnam veterans. So they have that in common. They're all veterans, three of them. Um, and the vigilantes picked the wrong person to scapegoat on, because freaking Woodard, man, that guy is not just packing heat. Okay, he's like Rambo in the First Blood movie. Do you remember First Blood? Woodard, apparently, turns out he's ready for a war at any time if necessary. He's packing heat. He's got like explosives, and you can tell he's very trained from his years in Vietnam. And so those vigilantes have no idea what they what they're stepping into, man. Well, no idea, no idea. I can't wait. I think by the time the episode cuts to black, um, an explosion happened, and we'll find out next week who gets hurt. Oh, I forgot about that. Tonight's episode also, there's that one scene that involves Amelia and Mammy Gummer's character, um, Tom Purcell's wife. Okay, Tom Purcell's wife, played by Mammy Gummer. I think she is the daughter of Meryl Streep, I believe. Or anyway, that also is one of my favorite parts of tonight's episode. Mammy is so powerful in her performance in that one. Um, and she keeps mentioning, I have the soul of a whore. Damn. um, you can tell her character is so not remorseful, but she beats herself up. You know, it's like, God, I miss my kids. Just like Tom Purcell's like, I can't stay in that house. Every inch of it reminds me of my kids, and now I guess it sinks in now. The guilt and the regret. Maybe they're saying to themselves, "Ah, I was a terrible parent. I was a terrible parent, or we were terrible parents." Um, and yeah, man, that the soul of a whore. I wanna bet that line is from David Milch, who gave us Deadwood and Swearingen. The character that cusses like a storm. I want to believe that that's David Milch's line. So yeah, that's one of my favorite parts as well in tonight's episode. Before I forget to mention that. So yeah, oh my god, I freaking love this show, this season. It's so chilling. Even though it's long, but I was like, really, I was watching the entire time. Like, I did not find any single minute. There was no single minute about it that's boring. I was like so interested and engaged. Like, oh my god, where's this going? I want more clues to be revealed. Give me, you know, peel the layers even more for us, the audience, before you, of course, you solve the case and reveal it in the last episode of the season. All right. So that's it. Those are my thoughts, my long rant about tonight's episode 4, The Hour and the Day of True Detective season 3, starring Mahershala Ali and Stephen Dorff. Share your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think? If you've already seen the movie, I mean the movie. If you've already seen the episode, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe to my channel, ring that bell, press that like button. And as always, if you can help support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/ramascreen. That's patreon.com/ramascreen. Let's rock this.